But how do we manage this risk? How do we manage the reward? How do we build confidence when we're trying to mitigate that risk and not shut the kid down? Recently I was on my mountain bike charging down the hill on a trail I know super well. And I absolutely love a good adrenaline ride. I'm always seeking the next adventure. It just fills me with joy and confidence and just that rush of blood to the brain, to my body. However, with riding my bike comes a bit of inherent risk, but I think of myself as pretty good until I took a spill off of a little jump that I've done countless times, and normally falling over on my bike, no big deal. Well, this time somehow I caught the side of my head. I wear a helmet, but not full face. I recently upgraded helmets, and next I know, I'm flopping all over the ground, and you can just imagine the bike's over there, I'm over here, and I've got some body parts everywhere. Not that many body parts, but particularly 2 ears and a hearing aid, not on my head. Thankfully, my glasses stayed attached. So many damaged items that are key and essential to my life function, kind of important. And the element of this is I found myself with an ear that no longer had its prosthetic magnets. Not very many people can say they thrashed themselves on their mountain bike and then played Mr. Potato Head, right? So here you go. We'll get into why I have that and my glasses. But that was a bit of a risky decision. I normally mountain bike, but that risk cost a lot. I'm an adult, I can choose that risk, but we talked a little bit in the last episode, right, raising confident kids and what it was like, having a kid of our own, how wonder impacted us. And of course, the question I've got growing up, being in like 6th grade, Dwayne, how are you so confident? I remember even pastors, hey, you gotta come share how you're so confident. I'm a teenager. I don't know why I'm confident. I just do what I do. But I had many opportunities to speak, and of course, the humor of that, of taking the risk to speak, even though I had speech impairment growing up, hard of hearing and all of that, I found myself speaking and occasionally getting the opportunity. I was by no means a natural presenter on stage as a teenager, but I did find that I loved it. So taking that into account, I kind of want to open up and just share the beans. I've lost my ears over 10 times. I've probably lost and recovered about 20 times. And I could tell a number of stories just like the mountain biking one. I still had the ear, but it was broken, right? No more magnets, it's a little bit ripped, it's a little bit damaged. And that costs a lot of time and energy and money, and it's not a risk every parent is ready for. And it's one that I think about with my younger one, who's got 2 hearing aids, $10,000 on her head. We've already had to replace her hearing aids twice. Warranties are a godsend. But how do we manage this risk? How do we manage the reward? How do we build confidence when we're trying to mitigate that risk and not shut the kid down? It's been a conundrum of being a father, right, with a kid with special needs, hard of hearing. It's like, I want you to thrive, but I want to protect you. But I want you to go try things. But what if you get hurt? Well, what if you fail? I mean, maybe it's not like me. My daughter's not as inclined to physically hurt herself as much as I am, screaming down the mountain on snowboards, mountain bikes, rock climbing, and the like. I've always been driven to the action sports. But I also had to choose not to play basketball on the court. If I did play basketball, it was a gentle pickup game, probably more around free throw. Loved a good game of pickup football when it was touch. I played that with friends, but I had to consider the fact that I could take that towards like full-on team sports. So, 6th grade, you kind of go into this world and they're like, pick a team sport. And I had to opt out of all of them because of the fact that if I get hit on the basketball court, if I get tackled, it could really cost, money. I didn't have prosthetics at that time, but the hearing aids are not cheap. And so there's this element. How do we raise a confident kid when we need to protect them from, damaging extras, or, they have certain things going on socially, emotionally. There's all these extras that we have to be aware of when you're suddenly raising a special needs child. To the effect of why I'm so confident, well, comes back to I had to get confident fast because what's going on the inside and the doubts about will people like me and a lot has an outward display of the fact that I look different. And I looked even more different as a kid. It stood out. There was no escaping it. There was no escaping the teasing. There was no escaping the bullies. It happened. It sucks, but it happened. So to kind of lay it up, my name is Dwayne. I was born with Treacher-Collins syndrome. What that looks like a little bit is, I now have prosthetic ears. But Treacher-Collins syndrome affects your craniofacial structure. So if you really stop and observe my cheekbones, the ears are very obvious, the eye shape. It affects, from a chromosomal level, your craniofacial structure, i.e. bones are missing and or different. Another thing is I have a slightly narrow jaw. I lucked out from 18 to 25. It filled out a lot more than some. But it is narrow. I just hide it really well under a beard. Not because I'm trying to hide it, but I think I look really spectacular with a beard. My dad's always had a mustache or a beard, so a little bit of a family trait. But Treacher-Collins, of course, set me up to need a hearing aid, need glasses. I only have 30% hearing, so I'm 70% deaf, so technically blind, technically deaf, but I belong to the hard of hearing community. And of course, that meant I had to learn to speak without being able to hear super clear. Hearing with my first hearing aid, to the analog bone-anchored hearing aid when I was 16, to now a digital bone-anchored hearing aid. So if you've heard of Cochlear Baha, that's a popular hearing aid solution amongst many. Cochlear is a large brand. That changed my life at 16 because I used to hear subpar, right? You miss out on a lot of nuance. And so, humorously enough, here I am with confidence. I did not speak confidently when I was a kid. I would do what you would expect. I would kind of hide, I would stutter, I would mumble, I was uncertain because, well, one, I didn't hear certain pronunciations, certain sounds, so I couldn't enunciate a T or an S because it wasn't really coming in strongly. I had it better than, say, a hard of hearing person. For me, it's all outer. It's the not the cochlea, not the inner ear, but the fact that I just don't have canals. I'm missing an eardrum, and so that affects my ability to pick up on the nuance. So I spent a lot of time hearing enunciate. And while that was hard at the time, it prepared me. So a little bit of being challenged and not just, all right, well, he'll just go play. It has really built up my confidence to now speak when I was asked as a teenager to take the risk and put it out there. But growing up, I was unsure. And so even at that, humorously enough, my parents put me in the Colorado Springs School for the Deaf and Blind when I was about 6 years old to learn sign language on the side. So I went to a normal kindergarten, then I went to the School of the Deaf and Blind, and I know about this much ASL, so I can say ASL, and then I did learn awkward because I'm a dork, I thrive on awkward humor. So thank you, Michael Scott, for embodying everything I ever needed to laugh at and giving me, just the perfect picture into how much I can make people laugh. Not to that effect, right? You probably wonder, were you bullied? What was it like growing up? Aren't you afraid of your child being bullied? The short answer, yes, I was bullied. But more often than not, people were curious. I got the look. Right? If you've seen, right, we talked about Wonder, you see the movie Wonder, you're like, yeah, kids stare. Of course they stare. I stare. I've also been the only white person in a Chinese community, in an Indian community. You kind of get stared at when you're a little bit different, whether it's because of your craniofacial structure, which stands out, in less than 1% of the world, but even, as we know, the color of our skin. And that can feel awkward, but I also know, being one looking and seeing, well, they don't look like somebody who's been in my community. They're curious. They're not sitting there thinking, oh man, that person is so funny looking. The teasers are going to tease, and the bullies are going to bully, often because they have something to get out. And so often I would address the people staring and just say, hey, I know you're super curious. Do you want to know what happened to me? And it's yeah, I want to know. And just being able to put myself forth, that took a lot of courage. And of course, that confidence after the first time was like, oh, they are really just curious. Built my confidence. And that was initially not egged on by myself, but by my parents. Hey, they're wondering. If you can talk about it naturally as a parent, then your kid can talk about it naturally. And so that gave me a lot of confidence, seeing, I was like, oh, there's not a lot of over explanation here. There's not a lot of show or shame. My parents did a really good job of not normalizing is probably the wrong word, but just making the awareness that, hey, this is here. However, that didn't stop the fact that, yes, I was bullied. Seeing the movie Wonder, you know what it's like to watch a 5th grader go in feeling like the awkward kid out. And I felt like that was totally me in 5th grade, watching myself like, yeah, I've been at this school for a while, but there's that punk kid. And sure enough, so, hey, Four Eyes. At least they could come up with something original. Like, what about everybody else with glasses on? I'm missing ears. Can you come up with a better one? So if that doesn't show my inclination to, fight, flight, or freeze, well, I kind of go into a flight of self-deprecating humor. Now, the funny thing for me is that became a tool, a mechanism. Maybe not the healthiest of mechanisms, but when I could get the bully to laugh, they became my friends. And so, just like the movie Wonder, all the kids who wanted to pick on them, by the end of a school year, they're all my friends. I now had a bunch of friends to go safely into 6th grade with, who would protect me. And boy, did they, hey, don't tease him! And so I set myself up for success because people would defend me, which further built my confidence. So I got the blessing in disguise, and I thought it was going to be hard. Yeah, don't you have to go through that? I'm pretty sure it was harder for my parents, because as a parent, this is a lot harder than I was as a kid. So for one thing, you as a parent, if you're watching this, it's probably harder for you than the kid, as long as you can help your kid really, embrace who they are, be wonderfully different. Except, especially if it's craniofacial, sometimes it's, things like autism or Down syndrome. It's a little different. It's more physical paired with emotional, paired with social, and there's so many things going on. But you can be the rock solid confidence for your kids that my parents were for me. That doesn't mean I went into love life with ease. Making a self-deprecating joke and becoming friends with the bullies in the same grade is different than accepting who I was, so that when my to-be wife came along, I had the confidence to put on display because I had become comfortable in my skin. I had learned to own my face. Go look that up on a TED Talks. And that just summarizes like, oh yes, own your face. But then owning it with a proclivity for risk, how do you manage that? How do you manage putting your kids or letting your kids enter a risky situation? With a proclivity to go skiing, I had to wear my ears to ski because they hold my glasses on, and I embraced skiing and snowboarding like you would expect a rambunctious adventure junkie to do. However, the thing that none of us considered is what happens when you're on a ski lift and you just kind of, you're scratching, you got a beanie on, so it's kind of holding things together, and your ear is no longer attached to your head. That's just one of my snowboarding, lift stories of losing my ear. Never recovered that one, and it's go home, and you're like, Mom, Dad, sorry. And let's just say, as a parent, you know how, right? You feel so pent up. I'm trying not to react. How do I keep my cool, calm, collected? I don't want to yell at my kid. I'm pretty sure my parents, mad as hell. Especially Dad. Kind of like can't you consider your ears? Can't you consider the fact that you have a hearing aid on? And that was a hard talk to have. Could they have done it nicer? Maybe. But it is that element of, hey, you have to consider what you've been given. But how much space can I give you to go thrive? Again, back to that choice. Do I take these risks or not? Okay, I had to give up basketball and football. Can I keep this? What could I do? So I ended up just wearing a full, balaclava, right? Goes over, I got this nice big circle. Your ears aren't going to get lost with a full balaclava, right? So that's a very physical manifestation of talking about mitigating the risk. Well, I've taken the same steps with biking. I no longer wear just the top helmet. I've got a full face helmet. Imagine the kid on the dirt bike. I've got that full thing on. Ears aren't going anywhere anymore. Not going to break hearing aids. I'm certainly not going to break my head. I can take that risk because I've mitigated it with as much protection as possible. Well, that same physical understanding can be applied to the emotional setting, the social setting, the business setting. So even with our kids, something that I do to give them space is I put them in recently we just had something called a business fair for kids, children's business fair. And an entrepreneurial activity, especially when they're seeing mom and dad do it, is a great place to go and take a risk. Right? I got to put myself behind a booth and try and sell a product. Right? They're taking a risk of putting their face out there in this space. But the fact is my daughter is kind of super cute with her 2 hearing aids sticking out, and it's kind of obvious, but she's super cute, and that draws people in. And people are so nice. But every now and then, it's and they don't want to ask her. Obviously, she's 6, so may not be able to answer. How come your daughter and you look so different, right? So it's managing the curiosity. And she, Aryasha, my youngest with Treacher Collins, is observing how I interact when those questions are asked. How can we create a space that they're safe to build that confidence, to get out there and become confident? And for me, it's, more and more, back to that, I don't know any ASL because I was pushing away. I was like, I'm normal. And the older I've gotten, I was like, no, I'm kind of wonderfully different. I'm incredibly unique, and that's to my advantage. I'm in the consulting space. I put myself out there online. I've helped my wife put herself out there, and it's become an incredible aha over the years to go, nobody ever forgets this face. And when I take my ears off on stage, you never forget this face. And then it's going, oh. And that builds all the more confidence because then you realize this is something I've got. I'm incredibly boisterous. I draw attention. I draw attention just because of the way I look, and then I act the way I do because I'm an attention seeker, probably because everybody's already looking at me, so why not build upon that? And I'm able to use that boisterous energy, that pay attention to me to kind of really amp up the conversation. Does that mean I'm always comfortable? No, I'm totally uncomfortable when I'm in a space of a ton of people, especially in a noisy cafeteria, and I don't know anybody. I'm just as uncomfortable as the rest of you socially awkward, cool kids. Like, I don't know anybody, I want to hide, not because people are looking, because it's uncomfortable. And then you add the fact, it's like, I know people, they're gonna, what happened to his face? And it's not as apparent as it used to be, but they're certainly gonna see my kid where it is more apparent. And, just giving that confident energy and reminding myself, oh yeah, I am confident. And that's a lot of why we put this children's book together, why I egged my wife on, because she's the better writer. As you can see, I just talk a lot. And just putting forth this energy of, what if you could put in a kid's mind, I am wonderfully different, when they're just beginning to learn to read? What if you could seed that belief of, not, oh, I am Treacher Collins, I happen to have this and I have to go out into the world and manage this, and it's going to be hard, although true sometimes, but I am awesome, I am a leader, I am boisterous, right? If you can't tell, I feel like that, right? And so kids latching onto this, because you can look at these shirts for the autistic kids and, it's I am. Nothing about autism. And it's like, oh man, there's so much beauty in the kid who has autism, in the little girl that we know with Down syndrome, and just watching her and my daughter interact. It's like, wow, this is so cool. Or watching the deaf girl we know at church just sign and interact with the minimal amount of sign language I know. Dang, my wife does it a little better. It's just like the eyes light up. She's like, wow, somebody who can talk with me. And all these other kids who just have something going on, whether it be a birth syndrome or something that happened to them growing up, or, just like my daughter, dyspraxia. It's the gift you can give is calling out the gold, or the I, you are so beautiful. And those statements build confidence, and then letting them go take risks. Stay tuned. My wife's got an incredible story about how she grew up with being the one in the middle with a special needs sister, and what it was like to be like this sister in wonder. So super excited. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell. We're going to hang out and build a community of amazing parents raising confident kids. See you on the next side.